This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marchioni and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchioni.
We're here celebrating the final conversation in the Practical Prayer Podcast series. We seem to have run our course, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But this is episode number 228. And if we're counting in 12-week seasons, this is the end of season 19. And as I mentioned last week in the penultimate or next to last episode, we started this 4.5 years ago, and Carol and I met, I think, in the summer of 2020. So this has been going for a while. And the interesting thing is, we can continue telling the story, but the storytellers have changed, and our understanding of the story has changed. And the idea and the practice of practical prayer is pretty much the same. And if you go back through 228 episodes, which you can find out there in the podcast listings, the basic story of how practical prayer works has not changed at all. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can discuss that and approach it. And Carol has been fabulous at doing that, because I originally thought we had maybe 1 season in it. We can do a dozen of these things and then be done. And it's kept going because of the nuance and her inquisitiveness and the perspective that she brings from, you describe it as the other side of the street. And I, on the other hand, have learned an awful lot about the other side of the street, because I kind of ran away. I ran away from that side of the street when I was 12. And it turns out that there's some things worth knowing there. So we're going to, I'm going to stop talking and let you say stuff that you want to make sure that we cover, if there is anything.
I don't know that there's anything specific. Yeah, it is. But I mean, we've talked about so many things, and what's the most important? It is absolutely impossible to say what that would be. But you said everything that we've talked about is about the one, right? It's all the same. So I think that's one way to look at it. I kind of like to feel like we've talked about more than just one thing, but I get it 100%. But what is important to me, when the day we met, this is just how Carol is. I'm very attentive to flow. So that way I set an intention and I pretty much don't deviate from it unless the flow goes a different way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'm that way because my father was, let me just be honest. But if you set your intention, I'm very conscious of being in divine alignment. And it doesn't mean that things won't change. I'm sensitive to change, like flow, like, okay, you go this way, you feel like you go this way, and you can put up resistance, which I'm quite good at, during my life.
Yeah.
But because you talked about, being a control freak and all that. I caught that last week.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is to, when it's time to flow, if the stream takes a different direction, then go with that, because that's where the bigger space is, the opportunity to learn and change and try new things and all of that. So if you're rigid and you don't, then you miss out on one of the things that really lights me up, was the infinite possibilities. Because on the side of the street where I came from, there are not infinite possibilities. There are set possibilities with life and gender and all of that kind of business. But in New Thought and spirituality, there is none of that. And I find that extraordinarily attractive, as well as, being sensitive to what the Buddha teaches and all of that, because I love comparative religion. It's like flow and non-resistance and non-doing. And that is such an amazing place to be, because that's where the blessings just go wild in that space. It's, and let me context it, then I'll stop. I remember when we met, I was on Facebook and my mind was on, I have gone as far as I could go without a teacher. So I was studying spirituality and reading, and everybody knows all of that. And I'm relentless when it comes to self-learning, but I just felt like I couldn't go any further. And that day you were on, an ad came up, and it was you. And I thought, well, this is crazy, because here's an ad talking about teaching and opportunity for learning, exactly what I was just thinking. So I called you, and this is the big deal. I called you and you answered the phone.
Who answers the phone these days?
Nobody answers. So I'm fully prepared to leave my well thought out voicemail. And you said hello, and I'm thinking, well, what do I do now? I'm not.
Uh-oh. What's this about?
So, yeah, expecting somebody. So I knew exactly what I wanted and had spoken to Spirit about it. And so when you showed up, it was simply, this is the response to what you asked for. So it's very easy for me to stay in alignment when something like that happens. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to debate it along the way. This is what Spirit has given you. Now, if you stay focused, you'll get it. And I'm good at staying focused.
You are good at staying
focused.
There we go. And one of the things that I've noticed over the episodes, over these many, many moons together, is you'd kind of gotten as far as you go in your self-study, and you needed somebody to interact with. And I became the guy to interact with. And I have spent 228 episodes and a bunch of time before that giving you the same answer to all of the questions. I mean, there's only about 4 answers that I think that I can come up with, and I'll go through them before we get to the end of the episode. And I think what's happened is you've taken that perspective back to the Ascended Masters. And it lets you look at what they're talking about in that context. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. There's a lot of different ways to say this, but we're saying the same 4 or 5 things in different ways all the time. And it takes the whole thing up a notch. So in a business lifetime before, there was a business owner who watched out for things to become redundant or irrelevant. And when he noticed something in his business that was either redundant or irrelevant, it was time to make a change. And that, to me, is what's going on, is we have said this from enough different directions that we're at the risk of becoming redundant. So, yeah, we can talk about this again some more, and that would be fine. And it's always relevant, because whenever we approach whatever the topic we're approaching, if we take it from that spiritual perspective, that New Thought spiritual perspective, first of all, there's only one. There's one power, one presence, one love that sharing itself is all of its creation. We are that one. We are expressions of the one. We are part of the one. We can't point outside of ourselves for where the divine exists, because we're not just part of it. We are it. We are individualizations of it. And by extension, there's a couple of really important things, is that there is no one to blame. There's no one to ask for anything. Can you do me a favor? And there's nobody to blame when we don't have things go our way. And that's an outreach of the one. And the other one is that because there is only one, that one creative power has been creating since the beginning of time. It only has one answer. It's going to say yes. So what we need to watch is not what's the answer going to be, but it's how are we framing the request? What is it that I say that I want to have? And I noticed this is something I was listening over somebody's shoulder to a series of affirmations, and I noticed that they were all qualified. I know that I can have everything good in my life. It's like, it's great to know that, but you're not claiming it. I know it's possible for love to be in my life. Of course it's possible. Claim it. Ask for it. As the salespeople say, ask for the order. And that comes to the clarity of we don't want to be irrelevant. We want to make sure that we are clear about who we are, what we're bringing to the table, what we want to get, what we want to be experiencing, and to take accountability for it. We have the authority to create anything that we want, and we are accountable for whatever it was that we created. And based on whatever it was that we just created, we can start over again. Say, oh, wait a second. Based on recent experiences, I think I'd like to have this experience now. And the answer is going to be the same. It's going to be yes.
Yes.
That's
It took me a bit. It took me a bit to understand that when you first said it, because of course, on the other side of the street, the response is always yes, no, or wait.
Not now.
Or not now, maybe just wait. And then that is a lot of patience. And in that waiting time, you get to doubt yourself and your worthiness, and all of this stuff is just, just so much. That's okay if that's the way you came up. You're accustomed to that. There's no joy in it now. Don't get me wrong. People will say it's joy, but it's manufactured joy. Because when you want something, you desire something, you do not want to hear no, and you certainly don't want to hear wait. And so if you're waiting, it just leaves room for a whole lot, which is a whole nother thing. But when you said everything is yes, I'm thinking, now wait a minute. What? But the more I studied and read and listened to you, I understand what that means. Because not only is the answer yes is consistent also with your mindset, the spiritual maturity you have, which determines the way you ask the request that you ask. It's a whole thing, it's not just the answer is yes, because you want to make sure you get the yes to the right request.
Yep.
You request the wrong stupid thing, not knowing, and you get a yes, and then you got to live with those consequences. So for me, who peels back the layer of the onion until there's nothing left, it's knowing it's reframing the request to be consistent with a few things. And that would take me forever, but yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And on behalf of the people who are listening to this, to just put a concrete example on what Carol is talking about, there's somebody who's looking for a new job, whether they have a job now or they don't have a job and they want to have whatever. I'm looking for a job. And you go and you find that there's this job and you interview with the people and you decide that's the job that I want to have. And it's like consistent and focused, and that's the job that I want to have. And I want to have that job now. And that's my intention, is to have that job. And are able to ignore all of the warning signs that the interview went badly, that the boss seems to treat the other employees like a jerk, that it doesn't really pay as much as we'd like it to. The hours are not quite as convenient as we want. But when we get ourselves locked into that's the job that I want, the universe is going to say yes and give us the job that we say that we want, even if it's not the experience that we want. I have been in the situation where I got a job that I thought I wanted because it was the best that I could have at the time. And when I got fired 6 weeks later, it was like, thank God. Thank God this is over. I can move back home. I can start over again because this was just horrible from beginning to end. And it's not like we're being punished. We are being rewarded. If we set, and as I did, I set the idea in motion. This is what I want to have happen. And I got it. And I don't know, there was probably another wonderful job that was sitting there waiting for me that I wasn't paying attention to because I was focused on this one.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got myself righted. I remember there were other times where I was very detached. It's like, oh my God, there's this possibility, there's this job. And I'm going to find out on Monday and it's, or on Tuesday because it was a holiday weekend. And I'm not going to think about it. If it's a good thing, if it's the right thing for me, then it's going to be the right thing. And I think on Wednesday I got the job offer. And went and was delighted, and it was exactly what I wanted to be doing, and it was a fabulous, happy career, and things unfolded from there. And when we think that we know what the answer is going to be, we can force the universe to say yes, but we're not necessarily going to be happy with that. We need to look at the big picture. Okay, I want to have a job that's going to fulfill me and uplift me and let me connect with wonderful people and make a lot of money or plenty of money and just be joyous in my work. So you gotta go ahead. I'm gonna let you talk.
I want to. I was like right there with you on that. There's a part that can make that easier or not. So we say this. We love the term to say we're co-creators of our own reality. That's a beautiful thought. It's quite poetic, and it makes us feel it puts us in a position of feeling empowered in some ways. But we're co-creators with God or with the universe of our own reality. So once you accept the part that you don't have it all, you don't have to ask for something and wait for it, and hope that it happens Friday because you got the whole weekend. If I'm a co-creator, then that means that I have a partner that has a perspective as well. If we just look at it from that idea. So allowing the partner or inviting the partner's input and say, okay, that's pretty good, but that takes a level of spiritual maturity. And I think that I like to talk about things like that so that you don't skip over it and think this is all magic.
Mm-hmm.
It's a level of spiritual maturity that doesn't always come easy. You accept it, okay, because I have a good idea. I'm a planner.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not as bad as I was now, but, I would say things to God like this. Look, I know you're busy. I've thought this through. I think it's going to work. If you could just, if you have a problem, let me know. But this is great. So I'm not necessarily inviting God's interest or participation as much as the rubber stamp on my good idea.
Mm-hmm.
But then as you grow and you understand your relationship of oneness, okay, so you can go on with your good idea without the divine direction or spark or influence or whatever you want to call it. That's not very bright. And so that's why you end up, or we or others end up with, you got what you wanted, but it isn't what it wasn't the best and highest good.
Right.
So it takes a bit of maturity and some guts a bit to say, okay, I usually do it this way, but I'm going to step back,
That's the real sign of spiritual maturity, is to have an idea and to check in with the infinite. And when the answer is do something different, to give it up. Wow, I have all these blueprints. I've ordered the concrete and the rebar. What do you mean I shouldn't build this? It's like, send that stuff back because there's a disaster in the making here.
I have a dump site of ideas that I thought through very carefully, and it just didn't happen. Some of them did, but I think the better way is to really honor that idea of being a co-creator with God. And the God is within, and that's, those are other talks that will happen at different times. But it's stop and wonder and realizing that, okay, I am not the only one here. So, there's Ernest Holmes says there's a power in the universe greater than we are. And, he goes on to talk about using it for good, but you could stop right there and say there's a power in the universe greater than I am. Yep. And it's good, it's positive. So, okay, if it is, how about I slow down and at least take into consideration that power that's greater than I am, that will make me great as, whatever. How about I listen to see what it might have to say?
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a break, but I'm going to riff on Ernest Holmes first, because the quote that's attributed to him is, there's a power, and this is how he used to open his radio broadcast when he was on the radio. There's a power for good in the universe greater than you are, and you can use it. And my riff on that is, there is a power greater than you, and you are using it. And you're always using it, and we're all always using it, and it's always saying yes, and what's it saying yes to? But, that's where we get into game on. Let's take a break and continue.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marcione's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the New Thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcione. You know what?
We're on the finale episode of the Practical Prayer Podcast, and I just wanted to take a second to remind folks that even though we are not going to be introducing new episodes, you can find the entire library, 19 thrill-packed seasons, on Apple and Spotify and Google and every other place that you can find podcasts. All right. And you're going to talk about Blissipin.
I am, because Cher, hi. Cher, thank you. I'm going to use that. I like it. I like to take words and do stuff with it. So I got that. Watch it.
Blissipin. It's like discipline, but happier.
My mind was already racing. I said, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that implies that being disciplined is not happy, but I'm not going there.
Well, that's kind of true. Discipline is not blissful. It's rather, it's kind of rigid in a way.
If you're looking at it as somebody's forcing you to march in straight lines, then discipline can be really annoying. If discipline is, and I'll use the example of a spiritual practice, you get yourself into the habit every morning. Somebody a decade ago more taught me the RPM spiritual practice, which is rise, pee, meditate. So first thing in the morning, a meditation. And I have gotten very disciplined with that. And it doesn't feel like a discipline anymore. It feels like a framework that I now know that first thing in the morning, I'm going to do a meditation. And that sets me up for a different experience of my day. And if I'm delayed, or if I phone in the meditation, or I'm otherwise not completely present for it, I have a different sort of a day. So it's not like discipline is bad. Discipline is just a thing, and we can be blissful in the middle of it. But I like the word blissipin. Blissipin. All right, now I don't like it as much.
Discipline. I love it because I need it. Mm-hmm. I discovered years ago that I do need it. I'm not as good as some people who can freestyle and, I got to have the thing in place, and I'm good with it. Now, that could be, it could be blissipin, Blissipline
See, it is
because it
tough to
works for
say.
me. Yeah, Blissipline. It could be Blissipline because I'm used to it, and by now it's like, hey, I don't even have to think. I know what I'm doing. Uh, but I think it could be a little different. Discipline is a scary word. Like nobody wants to,
Oh, yeah.
embrace that.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it helps, then it's wonderful. And there's so many ways that, discipline or following guidance come into our lives. I've over the last few years taken to gardening, and I have a vegetable garden in my backyard that I share with my dog, and he mostly stays out of it, which is nice. And the time to plant the tomatoes is rather specific. And if I start too late, which I have done, then I spend the beginning part of the season catching up and then wind up with a crop that's not nearly as entertaining as it might have been. And if I start too early, then I wind up with plants that are just way too big to be sitting in the basement, just waiting for the ground to thaw. And so the discipline in that is getting into that groove, that place of balance where I'm doing what's mine to do and I'm letting go of what's not mine to do so I can participate in this process of planting and tilling and gardening and harvesting and then eating tomatoes and cucumbers.
So it pays off that way,
It can, and it gets a bad rap because discipline. You have to plant the tomato seeds in your basement and the second week in March in order to have them ready by the time it's warm in May. It's like, well, is that discipline or is that just understanding how I'm going to achieve the experience that I want? Good rap, bad rap, who can tell?
You can paint it any way you want. I was thinking that when you were talking about that, I have tons and tons of houseplants, just a lot, as much as can possibly be. And there's not an available space that the sun can shine in there, but each of them requires something different. So I have to be disciplined in the way I water and move them around and do things. And when I'm not, it shows up and it's very unhappy for me. So I know that, so discipline is, there's no bliss involved when I look and see that I have, not followed the rules that I should with them, with them. You know how they say you can't kill a snake plant? I can. And it has to do with discipline, so it's a good thing, really. It's a good thing. Like I try to make sure I'm not emotionally involved with it. Just do it.
Works. Yeah. And so much of that is from our perspective and our judgment. If I look at it, and if you look at the situation that you're in, you want your houseplants to be where they are. The reason that they're there is because you like them. I mean, it's not like somebody's punishing you by bringing you houseplants and saying you must take care of them. So there's a certain amount of joy and uplift and delight that's coming from the houseplants. And in order to experience that, there are things that you get to bring to it. And that's the discipline. And built into the reward and punishment, the reward is there. You do what you're going to do, and you get to have your houseplants, and they look at you like they're happy. And if you forget to water them, or you forget to open the curtains, or you otherwise are not attentive to what you wanted to be attentive to, then the plants complain by wilting and turning brown and doing those other things that do not make you happy. And that's the law at work. That is the same creative law that creates everything. If we put ourselves in a position where where what we're asking for the law to do for us is different than what we want to have happen, then it's gonna create what's the law is going to create rather than what we want. And then we can blame the law, but it doesn't work. It doesn't help. So it's about being in alignment with that creative power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's a little, I think that I wish that all the babies that come in the world could come into the world with a spirituality, understanding, maybe New Thought or some of the other beautiful religions around the world that kind of share that freedom rather than a closed system, because unlearning is extremely difficult and extremely painful. And that's where a lot of my work actually comes from, because there's religious trauma is huge. It's huge and it's devastating and it's awful. And you can trace the root right back to when you're a little teeny kid. And I know it comes down through generations, but when you bring a child into the world, they don't have a choice in what to believe. They're told. And then you put all this stuff on, and it may not be good. It may not work. And then the child has to unravel it. And people spend their whole life struggling with that and trying to get out. And it's just countless hurtful experiences that people have because of that. Mm-hmm. So it's about, I think discipline comes in with the discipline of freedom. I'm going to be intentional about allowing this kind of information to children. That's why I wish they could, but I mean, that's just a random wish. Nobody's going to pay attention to me.
You never know, but
yeah, I don't know, but
maybe not today.
No, not today. But I think that, this is slightly, I want to get this in so that it goes out to everybody. I think that New Thought is just phenomenally beautiful. I just do. Even the parts that are difficult to readjust to, it's worth taking the time to do it, because there's a freedom there that allows you to embrace what really blew my mind. Infinite possibilities. That is never something you should ever have let me find out, because I'll look at something. I'm naturally curious anyway, but I'll look at something and say, okay, wait a minute. If there's infinite possibilities, let me see if there's some other better way or more productive way or whatever that this could be done. And that lights me up. But when you put people in a box, they miss all that. They miss it. And I wish that for everybody going forward, to just embrace the idea that there are infinite possibilities and the answer is always yes.
Amen. Buddha said, I come pointing to the moon. Do not mistake my finger for the moon. And the same is true of all of the spiritual practices, all of the religions, is that they all have an avatar or a saint or a sage or a prophet who comes pointing at the moon and says, look at the moon. And unfortunately, people tend to say, oh, look, the avatar has got everything going on. Let's follow the avatar. And it's like, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. A friend of mine says that spirituality is an intimate relationship with the divine, and religion is crowd control.
That's about accurate.
And they all have something. They all have something going on.
But I think the biggest thing, and there are spiritual practices that do this. It points back to you. It's we're the ones that decide how beautiful this life is going to be, and everything is not going to be really nice. I mean, we are in a time, a liminal space right now where we don't like the way certain things are going in the West over here, in this world, but it's still a beautiful time, because you get to see things in a different way, not just the way the news gives it to you, but you can see it in a different way. And what does this say to me, and what choices do I have within what seems to be so terrible and so, distasteful? How can I use this? And what's the message coming to me through this? And that's the kind of freedom and flow that I think is so beautiful in New Thought and related spiritual practices, where you don't have to get stuck by, this is bad and this is what it says. Okay, it's bad. Cool. I get it. But, this is a part of my growth. And when I come out of this, I'm going to be way better and smarter than I was before. because everything changes, and if it does, I want to change with it. And I want to be conscious of it and active and flowing in the change, whatever it may be.
Beautiful.
I don't know what it is, but I'll figure out when I get there.
Yeah, that's what we do. Let's take another break and then do the finale prayer in the Practical Prayer Podcast. No pressure there, huh? Here's Reverend Bill letting you know that the Practical Prayer for Real Results class is now available on demand. That's right, you can take it at your own pace, anytime you want. All of the information is at BeTheLight.com. That's B-the-light.com. You know where to find that stuff. The class is 5 lessons, broken down into 18 modules, and you can take them at whatever pace is comfortable for you. As you work through the process, it starts out with the theory, goes into the practice, there are experiential activities and exercises, and at the end of the program, you will wind up with an understanding of how practical prayer works, and a practical prayer for yourself that will work to create transformation in your life. And as you know, it works for everything. Take a look at the class online at BeTheLight.com. There's a sample lesson so you can see how the class is going to work for you and then dive in. The great news is it's on sale now. You can register and save $20 off of the regular price. I'm looking forward to seeing you in class.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni.
We are at the final episode, number 228, the end of season 19 of the Practical Prayer Podcast. Got to thank everybody who has been along with us for the ride. I got a note from Mary. It says, thank you for the past few years of the podcast. I enjoyed the conversation. I think the one that I enjoyed and remember most is the one about the green Volkswagens. I'm still looking for green Volkswagens. And if you want to find the episode about green Volkswagens, well, you have plenty of time. There's all 228 episodes, and you can go figure out where they are, and I'm not going to tell.
Green Volkswagen. I remember those way back.
Yep.
Let me know when you find it, Mary.
It's one of the exercises that we do when we're teaching somebody to do practical prayer is to pick a prayer for something inconsequential. And one of the example prayers is, finding parking spaces if you're the sort of person who needs to park your car, or that the bus or trolley shows up exactly at the most convenient moment. Or you can pray to see green Volkswagens, but something else that seems like it's reasonable, but not necessarily that common. And what happens is after we do the prayer, we start having those experiences. I started, I did prayers for prosperity, and I started seeing pennies on the ground. So I would pick up the pennies, and then I would see nickels and dimes and quarters on the ground. And it got to the point where a couple of times I found $100 bills on the ground. And it's, twice it happened.
What prayer was that? What prayer was that exactly?
I am prosperous.
Okay.
And it includes a willingness to pick up a penny, because a lot of people look at the penny and say, oh, pick up a penny. I had a teen group for a while. And I threw a penny on the floor, and I asked the teens if anybody wanted to pick it up, and they all had this attitude, as you can imagine teenagers would have. And finally, one of them did. And I said, okay, I timed that. It took you 1 second to pick up the penny. It's a $36 an hour job. What else are you going to get doing $36 an hour? and quarters pays more. It's not consistent work, but that's the thing. And it's about being willing to participate in the process. No, I don't need to have, and I'm not going to wait for there to be a $100 bill for me to bend down and pick up my free money off the ground. I need to do my part. It's about, the Quakers talk about praying and moving your feet. There's some of it that's ours to do, and some of it's the infinite's to do. But let us wrap up with a practical prayer, and this one's going to be continuing with our favorite agricultural metaphor. This will be about planting seeds. And the idea is that there is an infinite creative process, one divine creative power that has created everything. And that one, whether we call it spirit or God or nature or the Big Bang, it's the same one that has created everything that exists everywhere. And the metaphor that we can use is the one of planting seeds. So if we want to grow a cantaloupe or a tomato or a pumpkin, then we don't just go out into the garden and yell at the ground wanting to have a pumpkin. We know that there's work for us to do. We need to set aside a certain amount of space. We need to prepare the soil. We need to make sure that there are no weeds there, that there is adequate drainage, that there's not too many rocks, that there's fertilized soil. And we need to be intentional about planting the pumpkin seeds at the appropriate distance and depth, and then making sure that they're watered and the garden is weeded. So there's stuff that we get to do as part of that creative process. There is that intentionality that we're bringing to it. Am I willing to take part in this process to get the pumpkins or the tomatoes or the cucumbers that I'm looking for? And in back of all of that, the only way that we can get a pumpkin or a cucumber is to start with another pumpkin or another cucumber. There is an infinite creative power that has created that potential for the cucumbers, the pumpkins, the tomatoes, the flowers, whatever it is that we are wishing to have in our lives. That infinite creative power has created the template, the possibility, the potential for that, and has made it available to us. That infinite creative power that creates the tomatoes is the same one that has created each of us and all the activities that we're involved in, everything that exists everywhere. There is no fundamental difference between the tomato seed and a galaxy. Each is an expression of that one infinite creative power, that one divine presence, that limitless love that is sharing itself as its creation, and has been doing so since the beginning of time. Everything that exists everywhere is that one divine presence taking its own particular form. And because that's all there is, that includes me. It includes each one who is listening to this prayer. We are each individualizations of that infinite creative power, that divine presence, that limitless love. We are the seeds being planted in that rich, fertile soil and growing into something new and wonderful. So as we set the intention, as we open ourselves to that next experience and expression of greatness which we are seeking, as we allow ourselves and our potential to be planted in that rich creative soil, it's already working. It's already growing that newness. And in the same way that the garden can grow a cucumber or a flower or a tomato or a pumpkin, we are able to grow into anything. As we set the intention, as we plant that seed thought for the newness that we are inviting, that we are seeking, that we are opening to, that law is saying yes. That infinite creative power is saying yes. And there's nothing in the universe that stands in the way of it. As we gain clarity on that experience that we are desiring, that we are inviting, that we are seeking, that we are opening to, the answer is yes. And that creative power goes to work and begins blossoming into that goodness that we are seeking. And good is ours, pressed down and overflowing, good and more good, as much as we have the capacity for. And it's a blessing. And I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the good that's showing up. I'm grateful for the willingness of each one to play their part in that process. To let go of the seed thoughts that are for things that we don't desire. To let go of doubt that are going to keep us from planting those seed thoughts into that fertile soil. To let go of the hesitation and the uncertainty. To be bold and assertive and definite in our claim on the good. And to know with absolute certainty that it's already unfolding. I'm so grateful for all of this good. The deep feeling of thanks for this good that's unfolding, for this time that we've spent together, for the blessing of this Practical Prayer podcast series. I speak this word and I release it into that creative law, knowing that we are blessed, the good is underway, and so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com,
be-the-light.com,
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.